Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of the Lowell's Drilling Deeper Lowell Lodestars webinar. This week we have a very special guest, a great friend of the Lowell Resources Fund in Paul Roberts. Paul, welcome, and a really warm welcome to you. Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure, John. Thanks for having me.
Great. Okay, so my name's John Forwood. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of the Lowell Resources Fund. I'm sure we're going to get some great insights into some big discoveries have been made in Paul's career, but it's not financial advice. This month, I thought it'd be really good to talk about M&A, mergers and acquisitions and takeovers in the junior resources space on the ASX. I just thought I'd throw this slide up in terms of global gold production. And you can see for the last, 6 or 7 years that global gold production has been largely flat. Even with the gold price hitting record highs this year, we haven't really seen much of a response compared to some really substantial growth in global gold production, in the early part of the first part of the 2010s. And I think that the fact that production has been largely flat over that period is actually playing into the increase in M&A activity that we're seeing now. And the other thing that's, perhaps part of this, but obviously with more of a lag, is the falling amount of money that's being spent on exploration. You can see we had a bit of a peak here in Australia anyway in 2021. But since then, pretty much all those commodities, all those different commodity groups that have been targeted, the dollar amount spent on exploration has fallen off here in Australia. And when you couple that with the fact that, we've had some quite substantial cost escalation in that time, the actual number of meters drilled would have dropped off even more than you're seeing in that chart. So I think that's another factor that is just leading to the industry, if you like, cannibalizing itself. It's a natural thing to happen, M&A and takeovers, but particularly in copper, a lot of people are bemoaning the fact that there's very, very few copper companies listed on the ASX anymore. And we're seeing another couple of copper companies that are about to be gobbled up. But just back on gold, big driver for the gold price has been central bank gold buying. This is data from the IMF, and you see that note that I highlighted there. Data may be partially incomplete due to underreporting. Well, the World Gold Council has actually said you can see the declared purchases here by central banks in the light blue, and then in the dark blue or black, you can see what the World Gold Council thinks has actually been happening in terms of declared purchases. So there's a lot of gold that's being consumed by central banks going to their vaults and not seeing the light of day again. So we've got a high gold price, we've got falling exploration, we've got flat production, and I think a lot of that factors are reasons why we've seen a real spate of M&A activity in 2025 so far. I've just listed some of the companies that have been involved in takeover or merger activity so far in 2025 on the ASX. Largely doesn't include offshore companies. You can see gold in yellow and copper in green have featured prominently amongst M&A activity. The biggest deal in gold has been the Northern Star takeover De Grey, which just concluded recently. So I don't think there's any reason to expect, apart from the lack of takeover targets perhaps in copper, I don't think there's any reason to expect that M&A activity is going to drop off. And Paul, I know, West Africa is very close to your heart and something that you're still very heavily involved in. You're a founder and former MD of Predictive Discovery, involved in making, the wonderful Bankan 5 million ounce discovery in Guinea. And we're seeing some pretty interesting takeover dynamics emerging, not just for Predictive Discovery, but more broadly across gold in West Africa.
Yeah, I'd just add to that remark, really, at that a much lower end, how interesting it really is to see that strategic stake in Predictive that was taken up by Lundin and Zijin, who are in alliance on Montage, either directly or through Montage, have been taking minority stakes in a number of other exploration companies. We don't normally expect to see M&A style activity with junior companies, but clearly that group as well, and possibly there are other groups that are thinking of emulating that, are really getting down into the very early stage companies, obviously in the hope of accumulating a much larger position in West Africa. And I think that the success of exploration in the Birimian is starting to make people realise that you really need to get involved in companies at a much earlier stage than normally you'd expect to see any M&A activity.
And I think, West Africa, obviously it's not just a single jurisdiction, but there are some really attractive places to go exploring from a geological and from a jurisdictional point of view. And I saw some interesting data the other day, just noting that actually in terms of ramping up a new gold operation, West Africa has performed very well as a general rule in terms of starting new gold mines, whether that's because there's a lot more oxide ore still to be treated in West Africa, or the logistics perhaps are slightly easier or something. But yeah, it certainly can be an attractive place to go gold exploring and gold mining, and I think that's being reflected in some growing M&A in the area.